On September 16, 2022, 22-year-old Mahsa Jina Amini died while in custody of the government's morality police for wearing improper hijab. This sent shockwaves throughout Iran. A massive protest movement commenced in response as Iranians demanded justice for Amini and equal rights for women. My name is Sydney Martin, and I'm the program manager and a researcher here at the Iran 1400 Project. I recently conducted interviews with a variety of scholars about the woman life freedom movement. Here's what they had to say.
There have been observable changes in the country. I hear that throughout Tehran, almost the majority of women are now no longer observing the mandatory hijab, even though the police crackdown has gotten worse. This seems to also be the case in some of the other major cities in Iran. But the crackdowns have also had a rather negative effect. The recent events have had a negative effect. I think that people have been frightened again into compliance. You know, you have a government that thinks nothing of murdering people's children, murdering 6, 7, 8-year-old girls in school just to shut their parents up. And to keep the adults from participating in their right to express themselves freely, to criticize the government for all of its failures, which are many, to criticize the government's brutality, which is atrocious. So in some respect, I think, given that this is the second major such crackdown in the recent history of Iran, the first one being in 2009, I think one of the negative impacts has been that people are more likely to be pessimistic about the hope for the kind of change that needs to happen in Iran. And at the same time, I think it has shown people the possibility of what can happen. Both Iran and the government of Iran finally realize that they are not isolated and that they cannot continue to behave the way they have been. So will this lead to an eventual compromise? I don't know. I'm not very optimistic, but I think that the hopes for a drastic regime change are today probably higher than they ever have been, because in many respects, I think this is the case with the toothpaste that you just simply can't put back in the tube. Well, I think the biggest obstacle is the systemic problem with the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is that it has a multifaceted, multi-tiered system of policing. And the most brutal of this system is the plainclothes people, who are actually not regular employees of the government. There is absolutely little scrutiny over hiring them, given the desperation of people in Iran and its current economic stance and conditions in Iran, which is dismal. It's easy to find youths who are either relatively neutral or maybe just very desperate to feed their families, to convince them that for, $50, $30, $40, $50 a day, they can have access to all sorts of riot gear and go out there with absolute impunity and wreak a lot of havoc. So that's been, one of the impediments to anything really happening, one of the major ones. The second one that we unfortunately have become aware of in the West is the extent to which many governments in the West, including and probably exceptionally the German government more than all, have been economic allies of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Revolutionary Guard, which on any standard of human rights and amnesty rights are probably among the cruelest governments and most brutal rulers that humanity has seen in the last 60 to 70 years of human history. Nevertheless, the German government and many others in the West, and arguably the government of the United States, have found it to their benefit to take advantage of this general embargo that's on the Iranian government and on the people of Iran, only to be able to purchase their goods in the black market or find loopholes or ways to go around to make deals with the government of Iran. I, for one, am convinced that the reason that the German representative at the UN was so adamantly and so vehemently opposed to the what was the correct and morally, ethically, and historically right thing to do of calling the Revolutionary Guard the terrorist organization that it is because they did the math really quickly and realized that it would be devastating to the German economy and the European economy. So this is, I guess, one of the roadblocks that we discovered. I guess it's both good news and sad news at the same time, but at least it is now out in the open. The only way that the condition of women in Iran is going to change, the only way that the woman life freedom revolution is going to succeed and meet its ends is through a entirely wholly democratically elected government in Iran and a completely secular rulership in Iran. Whether that's a parliamentary rulership, whether that's a parliamentary monarchy, whether that's a democracy, is irrelevant. But what absolutely must happen is that the governing body presiding over the lives of Iranian people must be 100% a secular government with every secular ideology imaginable written throughout its constitution and every level of human rights on the simple basis of human rights, with complete disregard for gender, for sex and sexuality, to govern the laws of Iran. That is the only time I believe that we're going to be able to say with certainty that the woman life freedom revolution has succeeded. I see this as a increasing possibility in the history of Iran and the future of Iran. I don't think that the people of Iran have a choice but to end up there. Iran currently boasts one of the largest populations of educated women anywhere on earth, and the presumption that these women are going to continue to tolerate this level of complete disregard for their rights across the board in family law, in other civil liberties, is just ludicrous. So, in my opinion, it's really just a matter of when. And given what we saw last year, I think that the prospect of this time coming sooner rather than later is greater than it has ever been in the last 44 years. Yes. I think what most people tend to forget about the women life freedom movement is that this struggle for women's rights is not only a year old or even 44 years old. It is a struggle that goes back to the 1850s in Iran. Since the people of Iran, under that time, under Qajar rule, came into contact with the West, this notion that the Western culture is out to completely destroy and deteriorate the lives of Iranians has been part of ongoing dialogue between, I guess, two fractions that we may call the modernists and the counter-modernists. And since then, the veiling of women, the social position of women as to whether they should be kept in, sectioned off quarters of the house, which is exclusive to women, to which other men have no access, or the kinds of liberties that they can have and the ways in which they can participate in the greater social life of Iranians, has been an ongoing debate. In the early 20s, in 1936, in the early 20th century, in 1936, the then Shah of Iran, Reza Shah, by force mandated an official unveiling of women, where overnight women were no longer allowed to leave their homes with the traditional Islamic hijab. And the impact of that was felt throughout society over the following 40 years or such. Iran very quickly moved to a Western-style democracy, or kind of democracy. It wasn't really a democracy. It was a constitutional monarchy. I know that there's reasons to criticize that government for some of the political complications and lacks of freedoms that certainly did exist in society, but in the general scope of things, the condition of women was certainly very much improved. What has been different this time around is this is the first time in the history of Iran, and really in the history of humanity, where women as a collective have stood up and demanded their rights. And in doing so, they have demanded that their authority and their agency be left in their own hands without the patriarchal hegemony having a say in it. So it is important, I think, for people to understand that what happened starting, August and September of 2022 is a part of an ongoing narrative that has been going on in Iran since 1850. And it's really only after we contextualize it into this history, into its proper history, that we can truly appreciate the momentous event that the Women Life Freedom movement represented, and the watershed event that it has been, again, not just in the history of the people of Iran, but in history of humanity, because it is the first time women are standing up. And I think for that reason, it can only move in one direction, and that is the achievement of the ultimate goal of that revolution. Again, I think that this toothpaste is out of its tube, and there's absolutely no way to put it back. And I very much hope that at least I will be around long enough to see this revolution succeed.